go.
The connection they once had now felt distant, like something slipping through his fingers, and the feeling made him uneasy. At the same time, Chrissy was at a friend's house, enjoying a carefree afternoon filled with laughter and lighthearted conversations. The sunlight poured through the windows, casting a warm glow over everything. For a moment, she felt free from the weight of her past, a weight that had been following her for years. But as she laughed with her friends, a small part of her couldn't help but think about Jim. Despite everything, she still felt a pull toward him. She tried to shake it off, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't completely rid herself of the feelings she once had for him. Meanwhile, as the sunset painted the sky in vibrant shades of orange and red, Jim's phone buzzed, sending a chill down his spine. He glanced at the message. It was from one of his friends, and it read, "Just a heads up, Common is back in town." The name Common hit him like a ton of bricks. His breath caught in his chest. Panic began to set in as a wave of doubt and fear washed over him. The message felt like a warning, but he dismissed it quickly. He didn't want to believe that something was wrong, but deep down, he knew that something wasn't right. With his mind racing, Jim decided to confront the situation head-on. As he drove to Chrissy's place, a mixture of anger and confusion filled his thoughts. How would Chrissy react when he showed up unexpectedly? Would she be happy to see him? Or would she be angry? His mind raced as he pulled into her street, and then his heart sank when he saw a familiar car parked outside. It was Common's car. His stomach twisted into knots as he opened the car door and stepped out. The tension in the air felt almost unbearable. He walked toward the door, his fists clenching at his sides. As he pushed the door open, the laughter from inside hit him like a slap to the face. He froze. There, on the couch, were Chrissy and Common, laughing together, their bodies relaxed in a way that seemed too familiar. It felt like a betrayal, an intimate moment that he wasn't meant to witness. "Jim!" Chrissy gasped, her face draining of color as she saw him standing there. She scrambled to sit up, but her movements only seemed to amplify the tension in the room. Jim's voice boomed. "What the hell is going on here?" His anger was palpable, and Chrissy could see the hurt in his eyes. "I don't even know where to begin," Chrissy muttered, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. She looked at Common, then back at Jim, her words stumbling out in a mixture of confusion and guilt. "Don't lie to me, Chrissy," Jim shouted, each word loaded with betrayal. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been hiding this from me?" Before Chrissy could respond, Common stood up, his hands raised in an attempt to defuse the situation. His face showed a mix of surprise and irritation, as if he wasn't sure how to handle Jim's sudden outburst. "Jim, man," Common said, his voice calm but firm. "There's more to this than you think. Just listen for a minute." Jim's anger flared up even more. "I don't want to hear your excuses," he shouted, stepping closer, the space between them crackling with tension. It felt like the air itself was charged, filled with the weight of years of unspoken words. Chrissy's eyes welled up with tears, and she tried to speak, her voice quivering. "Jim, just let me explain. Please, just listen to me." But Jim wasn't listening anymore. His rage clouded his judgment, and he could barely keep his emotions in check. "You've been lying to me. I can't believe this. You've been sneaking around behind my back." He stormed toward the door, his heart breaking as he did. Every part of him screamed to just walk away, but he couldn't help the ache that pulsed through him. Chrissy tried to stop him, but the words were already out and the damage had been done. "Jim, please. Just let me explain," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Jim turned to face her one last time, his face a mix of disbelief and hurt. "You think you can just string me along like this, Chrissy? Like nothing ever changed?" His voice trembled with the weight of his emotions, and as he stepped out the door, it felt like his entire world had shattered. The door slammed shut behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a rush of adrenaline, but it did little to ease the turmoil inside him. His mind raced with questions. Could they ever fix this? Could he ever trust Chrissy again? The betrayal cut deep, and the pain of it was almost too much to bear. As Jim drove through the empty streets, he knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger story. There were still so many unanswered questions. Could a love that had once been so passionate survive such a deep wound? The thought seemed impossible, and yet he couldn't let go of the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The next day, Jim and Chrissy found themselves at a restaurant in New York, facing each other across a table, the tension between them thick and almost suffocating. It had been a long time since they'd sat down like this, but the weight of their issues hung over them. They had to talk about it, and they both knew it. "Jim, we need to talk about your mother," Chrissy said, her voice calm but tinged with emotion. "She disrespects me at every turn. I can't keep acting like everything is okay." Jim sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's my mother, Chrissy. You have to understand where she's coming from." "I understand, but you can't keep making excuses for her." "It's not just about how she treats me, it's about how she treats our relationship," Chrissy replied, her eyes flashing with frustration. Before Jim could respond, his phone buzzed with a new message, and as he glanced down at it, he felt his irritation grow. His mother had sent another message, full of insults, blaming Chrissy for causing trouble in their family. Jim's face hardened as he read it. "This is unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. "She's messaging me about this now?" Chrissy looked at him, her voice rising with frustration. "All I want to do is be a part of your life, but your mother won't let me. She's making this impossible." The conversation was getting louder, and it was attracting attention from other diners in the restaurant. But before Jim could respond, his mother walked into the scene, her eyes burning with anger. "You think you can just come in here and take my son away from me?" she snapped at Chrissy, her words dripping with venom. Chrissy didn't back down. "You're the one who's been disrespecting me, not the other way around." The situation escalated quickly, and before Jim could step in to break it up, Chrissy stood up, her face red with rage. "This is why we can't work, Jim, because you let her control everything." In the heat of the moment, Jim's emotions got the better of him. His hand shot out, and in a moment of blind rage, he slapped Chrissy across the cheek. The entire restaurant went silent. Jim's heart stopped. The shock on Chrissy's face was enough to freeze him in place. What had he just done? He stared at her, his mind reeling. Chrissy stood there, tears welling up in her eyes, her face flashing between pain and anger. "You chose her over me," Chrissy murmured, her voice barely audible. Her words hit Jim like a ton of bricks. And just like that, Chrissy turned and walked away, leaving Jim standing there, his heart sinking. The restaurant felt like a hollow shell as he stood there, completely lost. Chrissy's words echoed in his mind, and he knew he had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. "Jim, you need to figure out what you want," Chrissy called over her shoulder, her voice calm but firm. "Because I won't be part of a love triangle with your mother." As Chrissy walked out of his life, Jim felt a deep sense of emptiness. He realized in that moment that he had just lost the one person who had meant everything to him. As the days passed, Jim couldn't shake the realization that his relationship with Chrissy was hanging by a thread. Would they ever be able to fix things? Or was this the end of their story? Their journey had been full of ups and downs, but this was the moment that would define everything. Jim had to face the hard truth about himself, about Chrissy, and about his family. Whether they could find their way back to each other remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: their relationship would never be the same again.